Hi, my name is Aiden Edwards, and this is my presentation on virtual machines and virtualization. So, just a quick history of virtualization and virtual machines. They were first developed by IBM in the 1960s and 1970s. They were created in an effort to develop effective time sharing solutions, and time sharing is basically referring to the shared usage of computer resources by a large group of people, and it was created to improve the efficiency of not only the people using those resources but of the resources themselves. So, as a result of the creation of virtualization, the cost of providing computing capability dropped considerably, which makes a lot of sense considering computers back then did not have the storage, the speed, and the capacity of our computers today. So computers back then often were only able to perform one task at a time very slowly, and this is the reason that virtualization was researched and created in the first place. And the core meaning of virtualization has remained the same ever since virtualization was created. And this reason was to enable a computing environment to run multiple different independent systems at the same time for efficiency's sake. So, what is a virtual machine? A virtual machine is a compute resource that uses software instead of a physical computer to run programs and deploy applications. It's basically its own virtual environment that operates as kind of its own computer, and it runs on hardware, as we're going to get to very quickly next. So, a virtual machine has its own CPU, it has its own network interface, it has its own storage, and it's going to run on hardware, as we're going to get to right now. So, how does a virtual machine work? A virtual machine works through a software called a hypervisor. A hypervisor is going to be what creates and runs these virtual machines. So, hypervisors are going to isolate hypervisor operating system and the resources from the virtual machines. So, basically, we have a host computer. They're called the host because they are the physical computer that uses the hyperdriver or hyperdrives to create the virtual machines. And the many different virtual machines that are going to use the host's resources are called the guest. Now, the hypervisor, as you can see, is sort of a middleman between the main operating system and then the different virtual machines. So, how it works is that the host is going to have his resources treated as a pool of resources that can be reallocated as an organization or as a person may see fit. So, I can have a virtual machine over here that uses this amount of storage allocated to it, and I can have another computer virtual machine with a different amount of storage allocated to it. And I can always change this around as I might see fit as well. So when it comes to hypervisors, we have two main types. We have the type 1 and we have the type 2. The type 1 is considered the more bare metal hypervisor, and this is because it runs directly on host software, and it's going to completely take over the host operating system. It is common in enterprise data centers and any applications that heavily involve servers, and this is why that mostly it's going to be organizations and large companies that are going to use this type. So when it comes to more the individual level, we're more commonly going to use something called the type 2 hypervisor, which is just going to run on a software on a regular operating system. It's not going to take over the host operating system. It's just going to be a software you run on the side that is going to manage and create the different virtual machines that you may want to create. So there are two types of virtual machines. We have a process virtual machine, and then we have the system virtual machine. Now, when most people think of virtual machines in general, they're going to think of the system virtual machine, which is going to create a fully virtualized machine completely separate from the host machine. So it is basically like its own separate computer on the side. But on the other hand, we have a process virtual machine that's more or less known by people, and it is going to be something that allows a single process to run as an application on a host machine. So how this works, for example, we could have a Java virtual machine. I could use anything related to Java, applications, software, anything of the such, without having to go out of my way and create a whole system virtual machine. So when it comes to virtual machines, they have many different advantages, which are the reasons why many organizations and companies are using virtual machines nowadays. So first of all, as I went over, multiple operating systems can be used on the same host machine. Now, why is this an advantage? It is an advantage for anyone using these virtual machines because different software and applications can only be run on certain operating systems. So I can have one virtual machine with Linux in order to run this software, another virtual machine on maybe Mac OS to run different software. So it is very flexible for people to use and get around having to go and buy different computers just to run different operating systems. So another main advantage of virtual machines are also going to be security. So when it comes to security, an example I can give of this would be a virus infecting a virtual machine and completely compromising it, or maybe a virtual machine, for example, just shuts down. So this is not going to affect the host machine at all because it's completely separate from the virtual machines. So this is why virtual machines are often used by software developers to test the software that they create. It's also used to maybe access questionable applications as well because it is a lot more secure and less risky for someone to use a virtual machine for this purpose than to use a host system. Another advantage of virtual machines are going to be their reduced hardware cost. You're going to reduce hardware cost to virtual machines because you're going to have your host computer and then you're going to have your many different virtual machines, as opposed to buying many different computers to sort of fulfill your needs. So you're going to reduce your hardware cost that way. You're also going to have more data security. You're going to have more data security because even though maybe a virtual machine might get hacked into or compromised, that data on there can be stolen, yes, but it will still not go and affect the host machine. So the more important data that might be on the host machine will not be taken. And also because you're running multiple virtual machines as opposed to buying and using many different computers, you're going to use a lot less power that way. And then lastly, virtual machines are going to be a lot more portable than just having many different computers. So besides the advantages that I've just gone over for the virtual machines, there are two main things that businesses love to use virtual machines for. First of all, businesses use virtual machines to accommodate different levels of processing power needs. So I might decide a virtual machine over here needs this amount of power, while another machine is going to need a lesser amount of power. It's going to allow organization and businesses to more efficiently operate their business by changing the power levels they may need, and they can manage operations more effectively this way. And more often, businesses actually like to use virtual machines for something called server virtualization. Now, server virtualization is the process of dividing a physical server into multiple different unique and isolated virtual servers of their own. And this is done through software, and it allows the IT department of a business to improve business efficiency. It allows them to improve business efficiency because the data is going to be more organized, it's going to be more accessible, and whenever they want to access the data, it's going to be able to be done faster because it's not just on one large server, and it's going to be more organized, as I said. So when it comes to virtual machines, they have some disadvantages as well. Some disadvantages of virtual machines, they all come from the same root cause, and that root cause is going to be that virtual machines are completely reliant on their host machines. So because they're completely reliant on a host machine, if my host machine has poor hardware and is very slow, my virtual machines are going to be very slow as well. And because they're completely dependent on the host machine's hardware, they're going to be probably even slower than the host. And another thing that comes with virtual machines and their dependency is going to be something called server sprawl. Now, server sprawl is going to be when a host machine has too many virtual machines attached to it, to where it becomes inefficient, and it's going to overall slow down all the other machines and make them less efficient. So when it comes to virtual machine software, there's a lot of different ones out there. Just a few to mention would be VMware vSphere Hypervisor, we have VirtualBox, Google Compute Engine, Azure Virtual Machines, Oracle VM, and IBM Power VM. And if you ever were curious, you can go look up online. There's many free ones that you can use. VirtualBox specifically that I have used in the past. I mean, you could just look it up and download it. It's pretty easy to use and it's free. So if you're interested in that, I would look into it. So a question for the after going over the content is going to be, what type of users are more likely to use a type 1 hypervisor? Is it going to be A, individuals? It's going to be B, enterprise data centers? Or is it going to be C, small businesses? So after you can think about that for a moment, the answer will be in the slides if you need.